All right, let's get right into it. In 2025, if you look at the headlines, Singapore looks like this golden lifeboat in a sea of complete global economic chaos. But here's the thing, for so many people who actually live there, it feels like that lifeboat is seriously taking on water. So today, we're going to investigate this massive disconnect, what we're calling Singapore's 4% paradox.
And just look at this number. On paper, the story is absolutely spectacular. The official government forecast for full-year GDP growth has been upgraded to a stunning 4.0%. I mean, think about it. Europe is stagnating, China is slowing down, and Singapore is, by every official metric, just a roaring success. It's the kind of number that should have champagne corks popping everywhere. But they're not.
Because that's the paradox, isn't it? You see that big, flashy 4% headline, but then you go and pay your bills. You look at your savings account. And the feeling you get, well, it's not prosperity, it's pressure. This is the real conflict we're digging into. This huge, gaping chasm between the official numbers and what it actually feels like to live there. So how in the world do we explain this feeling? Well, it turns out there's a word for it, one that just perfectly captures the economic mood of 2025. It's called the Vibecession.
Yep, this feeling actually has a name, a Vibecession. It's what happens when the economy is technically booming, but the vibes are just awful. You know, the spreadsheet says everything's great, but your wallet is telling you a totally different story. And right now, in Singapore, that feeling is absolutely everywhere.
So let's ask the question, where is this 4% growth really coming from? Because it's not from a boom in cafes or retail shops, I can tell you that. No, this is a very specific high-tech surge. It's driven by things like massive AI server farms and advanced pharmaceutical exports. Now, these sectors, they generate huge corporate profits, which look great on a GDP report. But they don't hire thousands of new people or raise wages for everybody else. The wealth just gets stuck at the top, creating this kind of hollow boom.
And this right here, this is where that pressure becomes painfully real. Your wages might inch up by, say, 3%. But look at the other side. The cost of essential services is just exploding. Medical inflation is running at a mind-boggling 12%. That's not a luxury. It's a non-negotiable expense that is just devouring any tiny wage gain you might have seen, making that 4% GDP number feel totally and completely irrelevant to the average family.
And if you want the ultimate symbol of this squeeze, here it is, $109,500. That is the price for a piece of paper, a certificate of entitlement, just to have the right to own a basic car. It's a six-figure price tag that has effectively slammed the door on a middle-class dream, reinforcing this whole idea that the golden lifeboat, yeah, it's only for the very, very wealthy.
Now, this split in the economy isn't just a feeling on the street. It is perfectly mirrored in the financial markets, where what we're seeing is a classic and pretty brutal K-shaped recovery.
A K-shaped recovery is actually pretty simple to visualize. One part of the economy, the top arm of the K, shoots straight up. At the same time, the other part, the bottom arm, just collapses. In Singapore, that upper K is thriving. We're talking about the big banks, the AI tech firms, the ones plugged into global capital. Meanwhile, the lower K, which is basically the entire domestic economy of small businesses and everyday shops, it's in a complete nosedive.
Just look at the undisputed winners here, the big local banks. They've literally become a fortress. They pulled off what's being called a net interest margin miracle, which is a fancy way of saying they kept charging high rates on loans while slashing the interest they pay you on your savings. At the same time, their wealth management divisions are on fire, serving over 2,000 billionaire family offices that have flocked to Singapore. And what are they doing with all that cash? They're giving it back to shareholders through massive, sustainable dividends.
Okay, now contrast that fortress of wealth with this number. A 47% year-on-year surge in businesses going bust, and these are overwhelmingly the small and medium-sized guys. So while the banks are posting record profits, the actual backbone of the local economy is getting crushed under the weight of higher costs and insane competition. This is the brutal reality of that lower K.
So how does Singapore even manage to survive, let alone thrive, in this completely divided state? Well, the answer lies in this incredibly delicate and frankly dangerous geopolitical high-wire act. See, Singapore has masterfully positioned itself as the Switzerland of the East. It's become a magnet for a flood of capital, both from a politically shaky West and from an East, particularly China, that's facing all sorts of regulatory crackdowns. Now, this massive inflow of money supports the Singapore dollar and props up high-end property, but here's the problem. Most of this is just safe haven money. It's just being parked in banks. It's not being invested in local businesses. It's not creating jobs for the average person. It's just sitting there. But playing the safe haven comes with a huge risk, and it's called Singapore washing. As the US-China trade war gets uglier, there's a growing concern that Chinese goods are being funneled through Singapore, maybe getting a new label slapped on, and then re-exported to bypass massive US tariffs. And you better believe US authorities are cracking down on this. If they decide Singapore is acting as a backdoor for China, they could slap on punitive tariffs that would absolutely cripple the very electronics exports that are driving that 4% GDP growth in the first place.
So, facing these crushing internal costs and these serious external threats, Singapore is making a huge strategic pivot for its future. It's called the Great Escape, and it leads directly across the causeway to Johor.
The whole plan is to create a twin city model, and it all hinges on the new rapid transit system link that's supposed to open in 2026. The logic is brutally simple. Keep all the high-value front office jobs, the headquarters, the finance, the R&D in Singapore, but move the stuff that needs a lot of land and labor, the back office stuff like manufacturing, data centers, support services, move all of that to Johor where costs are just a fraction of the price. It's basically an attempt to solve Singapore's physical limits by creating an economic backyard.
So, what does this all mean for the year ahead? Well, that high-octane AI-driven growth we saw in 2025, that looks like a one-off. The real outlook for 2026 is for a major slowdown. The new strategy isn't about growth anymore. It's about survival.
Okay, so in this kind of slow growth, high cost world, the smart money isn't chasing some explosive growth stock. No, it's looking for defense and it's looking for yield. This means you got to focus on companies that are basically insulated from the squeeze. Think about it. NetLink, which owns the essential fiber network everyone needs. Sheng, the budget supermarket that actually does better when the middle class has to tighten its belt. Fraser's Centerpoint Trust, which owns the neighborhood malls where people have to do their essential shopping. And of course, you have the banking fortress itself, DBS. These are the companies built to withstand the pressure, because they provide things people can't live without.
And that really brings us to the final and most crucial takeaway from all of this. The lesson from Singapore's 4% paradox is crystal clear. That headline number, it's an illusion. The real story isn't the total growth, it's about who actually benefits from it. So for 2026, the strategy is to ignore the noise of the big economic number and just focus on a simple principle. Don't buy the GDP, buy the beneficiaries. Because after all, a golden lifeboat is only useful if you're one of the very few who can actually afford a ticket to get on board.